The inmate who outsmarted the entire Supermax system. A red emergency light flashes. A steel door hangs wide open. And the most secure cell in the entire Supermax prison is completely empty. A guard whispers, voice shaking. How did he get out? Nobody gets out of here. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. The Ghost of Block D. The story begins inside one of the most locked-down buildings in the United States, a place where prisoners live behind two steel doors, motion sensors, pressure plates, infrared scanners, and 24/7 camera surveillance. A place where escape is supposed to be impossible. But one inmate, a man the guards nicknamed the Ghost, didn't just survive the system. He studied it. He watched every routine, listened to every footstep, timed every meal slot, every light cycle, every shift change. He never argued, never fought, never raised his voice. To most guards, he looked like the easiest inmate in the unit, quiet, calm, harmless. But there was something different about him. When other inmates complained about cold food, he silently observed where the officers stood. When others paced in frustration, he counted shadows on the wall to track guard movements. When others slept, he lay still, staring at the narrow gap under his steel door, watching light patterns change minute by minute. He was patient, silent, focused, and unknown to everyone around him. He was preparing, not for violence, not for chaos, but for something far more dangerous inside a Supermax. A perfect plan. The Ghost didn't believe in rushing. He believed in understanding. And before he made a single move, he needed to learn the one rule of the Supermax system. Everything is predictable until you make it unpredictable. 4 months, he studied every sound in the unit. The buzzing of cameras rotating, the clicking of heavy locks engaging, even the rhythm of guards tapping their keys. He built a map in his mind. He learned the weaknesses the prison didn't even know it had. And it all began with something so small, so ordinary, that the guards never thought twice about it. A routine that never, ever changed. The food slot opened at 7 a.m., 12 p.m., and 6 p.m. Not 1 minute late. Not 1 minute early. 3 times a day. Perfectly predictable. And the Ghost whispered to himself, "That's where the cracks are." The mistake the system didn't see coming. For years, the Supermax believed its routines were its greatest strength. But for the Ghost, routines were the prison's blind spots, repeating patterns that slowly revealed every flaw in the system. And the first flaw he discovered was so subtle that no one ever questioned it. Every day at 6 p.m., the food cart rolled down Block D. But the last guard on the shift, Officer Bennett, had a habit the prison never logged. He always paused for exactly 4 seconds at each cell before sliding the tray through the slot. 4 seconds. Every time. Every inmate. It wasn't official policy. It wasn't written anywhere. It was simply a human habit. A habit the Ghost could measure and weaponize. So one evening, while Bennett paused at his door, the Ghost didn't move. He didn't touch the tray. He didn't blink. He simply watched the guard's shadow, stretched long across the concrete floor, and counted in his mind. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. Every single time. But that wasn't the real discovery. The real discovery came from something the prison believed was unbreakable. The automated camera sweep. Every camera in Block D rotated on a fixed, unstoppable schedule, scanning every cell window, every corridor, every angle. But the Ghost noticed something else. Whenever the food cart rolled down the hallway, whenever Officer Bennett paused at a door, whenever the tray slot opened, the camera sweep always froze for 5 seconds. Not broke, not malfunctioned, just paused. A tiny pause. A quiet pause. But a pause in a Supermax is like a heartbeat stopping. For 5 seconds, the strict surveillance system became blind. And because it happened 3 times a day, every day, the Ghost knew it wasn't a glitch. It was a built-in safety function, stopping motion detection during close human contact. A function the manual never admitted existed. A function no one ever worried about. but a function that gave him something prisoners never get. 5 seconds of freedom. 3 times a day. Every single day. That was 15 seconds of blindness. Minutes each week. Hours each month. The ghost whispered into the silence of his cell. If the cameras stop because of the food tray, then the food tray is my key. But he wasn't ready yet. He needed more. He needed precision. He needed the next weakness, one only a genius-level observer would notice. And that weakness came from the guards themselves. Because in a Supermax, even officers fall into predictable patterns. Especially when they believe no one can outsmart the system. The guard who unlocked the plan. Officer Bennett didn't know it, but he was becoming the most important piece of the ghost's puzzle. Not because he was careless. Not because he was cruel. But because he was predictable, the one thing a Supermax cannot afford. Each night before finishing his shift, Bennett followed a quiet ritual. He always removed his left glove first. Always wiped his forehead with the same tired motion. Always exhaled like a man carrying stress home with him. And at 6:14 p.m., exactly 14 minutes after the dinner run, he always reached into his pocket to check his personal phone. Just a quick glance. Just a moment. But in those 2 seconds his attention was gone. And in a place built on constant vigilance, those 2 seconds mattered more than he'd ever understand. The ghost wasn't looking for escape tools. He wasn't looking for weapons. He didn't want to fight or run. He wanted something far more valuable. A rhythm. A pattern. A window of invisibility. Then one night he saw it. As Bennett checked his phone, a keycard lanyard clipped to his waistband swung outward just a little too far. Not enough for a normal inmate to notice, but enough for the ghost, a man who studied inches, seconds, shadows, to see everything he needed. The keycard wasn't loose, but it wasn't tight either. During Bennett's phone check, the card hung just within reach of the food slot. Not close enough to grab. Not close enough for a quick snatch. But close enough for someone with an understanding of angles and timing, and the exact 5-second blind pause of the cameras to make a move. Still, the ghost didn't rush. He spent weeks observing, adjusting, watching how far the card swung each day. He learned something every inmate inside that block already suspected. Every guard has one unconscious mistake. Every system has one silent flaw. And Bennett's flaw had just revealed itself. But the ghost needed one final piece. One confirmation. Something he had waited nearly a year to see. And it came during a storm. Lightning cracked outside. Rain hammered the roof so loudly it drowned out almost every noise inside the block. The lights flickered, not enough to cause panic, just enough to show weakness in the electrical grid. And in that single moment of flicker, the cameras froze half a second longer than usual. 5 seconds became 5.5. Half a second. Tiny. Nothing. But to the ghost? That half second meant the system could be pushed, could be stressed, it could be timed. And if it could be timed, it could be beaten. He whispered to himself. The storm showed me something the prison never wanted me to know. His plan was almost ready. But he needed one more thing, the most dangerous thing an inmate can attempt inside a Supermax. To test the system without triggering it. And that test would begin on a night when the guards believed the block was silent, calm, and routine. The night the ghost made his first move. The first test. The ghost waited until the quietest moment of the night. That strange hour when even the toughest inmates lie still, the guards get comfortable, and the prison breathes like a sleeping giant. 2:57 a.m. The dead zone. The hour when routines slip and human instincts take over. He sat on the edge of his steel bunk, eyes fixed on the small, rectangular food slot built into his cell door. It wasn't wide enough for a hand. Not strong enough to break. Not useful for escape. But the ghost didn't want to escape, not yet. He wanted something more important. Data. Confirmation. Proof that his theory was real. He needed to know whether the food slot sensors were linked to the camera pause, or if it was simply coincidence. So he did something no inmate ever bothered to do during the night. He gently pressed the inside of the metal food slot door. Just enough to make the magnets inside react. Not enough to trigger an alarm. just enough to mimic the start of a guard opening it. Click. That tiny sound echoed inside the steel hallway. Then, nothing. The ghost stared straight at the camera dome across from his cell. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15 seconds. The red light on the camera blinked steadily. No pause. He whispered, "So that's not it." He waited, listened, counted heartbeats. Then, patiently, quietly, he pressed the slot again. This time he held it longer. 3 seconds. 4. And at the 4th second, something happened. The red light on the camera blinked, then froze. For half a second. Then it resumed. That half-second freeze was tiny, insignificant, invisible to any normal person. But to him, it was everything. The ghost leaned back, eyes wide, not with fear, but with understanding. It wasn't the sound that stopped the cameras. It wasn't the guard touching the slot. It was the duration of the contact. For seconds. That was the trigger. 4 seconds of pressure on the food slot sensor caused the cameras to halt their sweep, a safety overload designed to prevent misreads during direct human contact. The ghost whispered, "That's why Bennett pauses for 4 seconds." It wasn't his habit. It was the system training him without him even knowing. Now the ghost knew the truth. Every time the guard held the food slot for 4 seconds, the cameras froze automatically. Not because of human error, but because the Supermax system wanted it that way. And if a system automatically pauses its surveillance, it means the system can be tricked. Tonight's test gave him something priceless. A blueprint of the prison's blind moment. But it wasn't enough. He needed a second test, a bigger risk. A test that would push the boundary between invisible and detected. One wrong move, and the alarms would flash red, the entire block would be locked down for days, and the ghost would lose everything he'd built. But he took a breath and whispered, "If I'm right, the next part will change everything." And so he prepared for the second test, the most dangerous step yet. The second test, breaking the pattern. The second test had to be done during the day. Not at night. Not in silence. If the ghost wanted to outsmart the entire Supermax system, he needed to test it when the prison was awake, when guards were alert, when the cameras were sweeping at full speed. Because if his plan only worked during the quiet hours, it wasn't a real plan at all. He needed proof that the system could be manipulated, even under full supervision. So he waited for the moment he had studied for months. 12 p.m., lunch run. A time when the hallway echoed with rolling metal carts, the sound of officer boots, and the tension of inmates waiting for their only warm meal of the day. The ghost stood at his door, calm, listening. Clank, clank, clank. The food cart wheels rattled closer. Buzz. The electric locks disengaged. Officer Bennett appeared at the end of the hallway, following his usual routine. Left glove on. Right glove tight. Keycard clipped to his belt. Shoulders slightly slumped from the long shift. The ghost whispered, "Right on time." He didn't want the guard. He wanted the system surrounding him. As Bennett arrived at his cell, the ghost didn't step forward. He didn't touch the tray when the slot opened. He only focused on one thing. The camera above the hallway. Bennett paused. Exactly 4 seconds. Just like always. But the ghost did something different today. Something he had never done during any meal. He tapped the inside of the food slot. Just lightly. Barely enough to be noticed. Bennett froze. Not because he felt threatened, but because he thought the inmate was impatient for the food. "Relax," Bennett said through the door. "You'll get it." But the ghost wasn't asking for food. He was asking for data. So he timed it. As Bennett held the slot open for 4 seconds, the ghost tapped the slot twice. The camera blinked. Paused for a moment longer than usual. Then resumed. The ghost's heart didn't race. His breathing didn't change. But inside, he understood something incredible. The system could be influenced by input from both sides of the food slot. The guard pressing from the outside. The inmate tapping from the inside. Together, it created a longer freeze. Something the prison never anticipated. He tested it again quietly. 1 tap. The guard held the slot. The sensor reacted. The camera paused for nearly 6 seconds. In a Supermax, that pause was enormous. A canyon. a lifetime. 6 seconds of blindness was the difference between escape-proof and vulnerable. But the ghost didn't smile. He didn't show emotion. He simply took the tray, nodded respectfully, and sat back down. Because he had just proven the one thing he needed to know. He didn't have to break the system. He only had to misdirect it. The second test was complete. And now, with all 3 pieces, the hammer pause, Bennett's routine, and the dual-contact sensor trigger, the ghost was ready to build something unbelievable. A timing pattern so perfect that even the Supermax AI wouldn't notice it. But before he executed his real plan, he had to solve one more impossible detail. A detail every escape in history had failed because of the hallway sensors. The hallway sensors, the real enemy. Every inmate fears the hallway sensors. They're silent, invisible, always active. And unlike guards, unlike cameras, unlike doors, they don't make mistakes. Pressure plates under the floor. Heat sensors in the ceiling. Infrared beams running across every inch of the corridor. The hallway is designed so that, if a mouse ran across it, nothing would happen. If a human foot touched it, the whole prison would lock down. Even the guards step only in specific marked zones. The safe path, never 1 inch off. Escape is impossible if the hallway is watching. So the ghost spent months studying the rhythm of the sensors. Every footstep, every echo, every shadow. And soon he learned something no inmate had ever realized. The sensors detect movement, not presence. That was the breakthrough. If something enters the hallway but doesn't walk, doesn't move across the plates, doesn't break multiple beams, the prison doesn't respond. It counts it as an environmental disturbance, like a guard dropping a tray, or a mop bucket rolling off a cart. This tiny detail changed everything. But the ghost needed proof. He needed to test it without stepping into the most dangerous place inside Block D. He studied the janitor cart that guards push during cleaning rounds. It had a long metal handle, flimsy, and when it rattled, sometimes one of the cleaning brushes fell off the side. He remembered something he saw months earlier. When the brush fell, the hallway sensors didn't react. Because the object didn't walk. It simply dropped in place. That was the key. Static weight doesn't trigger movement detection. So the ghost formulated the most delicate test of his entire plan. He removed a small metal cup from his tray, the kind used to hold applesauce or pudding. The kind every inmate is allowed. He washed it, dried it, flattened it under his knee until it became a thin, round disc of metal. Through the nearly invisible crack at the bottom of his cell door, a gap smaller than a finger, he slid the metal disc outward. It fell into the hallway. So, quiet. The ghost held his breath. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3, 4. Nothing. The alarm didn't sound. The lights didn't flash. The lockdown didn't activate. The hallway sensors ignored the disc completely. And in that moment, the ghost understood the truth. The sensors don't care if something is in the hallway. They only care if something moves through the hallway. This changed everything. But he also learned something terrifying. The sensors reset every 2.4 seconds, meaning if anything moved between resets, the system detected it. So he whispered to himself, "If I ever step into that hallway, I have less than 2 seconds to reach the blind zone." Less than 2 seconds. That meant the impossible. Unless he found a way to freeze the sensors. The same way the cameras froze. And that idea, crazy, dangerous, impossible, became the center of his entire master plan. Freezing the sensors. Freezing a camera was one thing. Freezing a Supermax hallway sensor? That was supposed to be impossible. Every officer believed the hallway system was flawless, a living, breathing security net that never slept. But the ghost understood something the system designers never planned for. If 2 different security systems share the same emergency failsafe, then disabling one might influence the other. The ghost didn't need to break sensors. He didn't need to hack doors. He didn't need tools. He needed timing. And timing was his greatest weapon. The clue nobody saw. One afternoon, during a routine inspection, 2 officers walked the hallway. One stepped on the wrong tile, not the safe path, just by mistake. A tiny mistake. But the hallway didn't lock down. Instead, the red indicator lights flickered. Only flickered. Just once. The ghost noticed something critical. The flicker happened at the exact same moment the cameras paused. He whispered, "They're connected." It made sense. During emergencies, fights, medical calls, food delivery, too many sensors firing at once would overwhelm the system. So the prison designers built a failsafe. If the camera system paused, the motion sensors softened for a split second to avoid false alarms. Not enough to let someone walk freely, but enough to weaken detection. Enough to build a plan around. Enough to exploit. The plan that should never have been possible. He studied it for weeks. Every time the food slot opened, cameras paused for 5 seconds. Hallway sensors softened for 0.7 seconds. A tiny window. Too small for an escape. But then came the second discovery. When he tapped the slot while the guard held it, the camera pause extended to nearly 6 seconds. And the hallway softening extended to almost 1.5 seconds. 1.5 seconds. Still too short for a human to move. Unless the timing was perfect. Unless the blind spot was exactly located. Unless every piece hit at the same moment. The ghost whispered, "I don't need 5 seconds. I don't need 10. I need 1 second. In the right place." The blind zone. There was only one space in the hallway where the sensors could not see. The shadow behind the food cart. Not the cart itself. The shadow it cast. When guards pushed the cart, its shadow fell across part of the floor. A dead zone where infrared beams bent around the cart's shape, creating a pocket of darkness. It lasted less than a second. Barely noticeable. Always moving. But if he could reach that shadow, during the extended 1.5 seconds softening window, he would be invisible to the hallway. For a moment long enough to pass from his cell door to the blind zone, without setting off a single alarm. But the timing had to be perfect, down to the millisecond. The ghost's final calculation. His escape wasn't about force. It was about mathematics. He studied steps, distances, angles, the exact speed of the food cart, the rhythm of Bennett's pauses, the duration of camera sweeps, the softening time of the sensors, the travel speed of the cart's shadow. After months of calculation, he wrote the entire escape inside his mind. Guard pauses 4 seconds. Ghost taps twice. Camera freeze jumps to 6 seconds. Hallway sensors soften to 1.5 seconds. Cart shadow reaches the cell door at second 0.4. Ghost slides under the shadow by second 1.1. Sensors reset at 2.4 seconds. Ghost already in the blind zone. If any piece went wrong, by even half a second, he would be caught instantly. But the ghost wasn't guessing. He wasn't hoping. He was certain. Because he had timed every sound in Block D, down to the heartbeat of the prison itself. And now, after years of preparation, he was finally ready to make his move. The day of the impossible. It happened on a Thursday. Not special. Not chaotic. Not different. Just another day in a Supermax. The kind of day when the system relaxes because everything feels the same. That's what made it perfect. The ghost sat on the edge of his bunk, completely calm. Not excited. Not nervous. Just waiting for the rhythm he had memorized for 2 years. 11:59 a.m. He closed his eyes. Listened. 12 minutes. The doors unlocked for the lunch run. He counted. 1, 2, 3. The wheels of the food cart began rattling down the hallway. Every sound fit the pattern. Every vibration matched his calculations. He whispered, "Now." The perfect setup. Officer Bennett appeared first, gloves on, moving at his usual pace. Behind him, a younger officer pushed the heavy lunch cart. The ghost didn't look up. He didn't make sudden movements. He wanted to appear normal, predictable, harmless. Bennett paused at cell 14. For seconds. Then 15. Then 16. Everything was matching the routine. Then he moved on. Clink, clink, clink. The cart rolled forward. The ghost stepped closer to his door and positioned himself exactly where he needed to be. The shadow behind the cart was approaching. Close, close, close. And then, Officer Bennett's phone buzzed. He reached into his pocket, checked it, exactly as he always did at 12 p.m. on Thursdays. The ghost whispered, "Perfect," because that phone check created an extra delay. An extra swing of the keycard on Bennett's belt. An extra second of distraction. The exact distraction the ghost had built into his plan. To figure. Bennett reached the ghost's door. Paused for 4 seconds. The slot unlocked. That was the first trigger. The ghost stayed still until the last half second of that pause, then gently, 2 touches from inside. The combined pressure activated the hidden failsafe. Inside the camera dome above, the red light blinked, then froze. 6 full seconds. In the hallway, the sensors softened. 1.5 seconds of weakness. At the same time, the shadow behind the cart slid across the floor like a slow-moving eclipse. It reached the bottom of the ghost's door exactly as he'd calculated. He whispered, "Now." The move that shouldn't have been possible. The ghost did not step out. He didn't walk. He didn't slide. He fell. He bent his knees and dropped straight down, letting gravity pull him into the hallway, landing directly inside the moving shadow. No footstep. No stride. No forward motion. Just a silent drop. Like a shadow joining another shadow. The sensors saw nothing. The cameras saw nothing. The guards saw nothing. And because the cart was moving forward, its shadow carried him with it. Just a tiny bit. Just enough to clear the detection zone. And place him in the blind space behind the cart. The ghost was now outside his cell. In the hallway of a Supermax prison. Standing 3 feet behind 2 armed officers. And not a single system in the building realized he was there. The first second. The ghost pressed himself flat behind the stacked trays, silent as air. The cart continued moving. Bennett continued talking about something the younger guard wasn't even listening to. The ghost didn't breathe. Didn't blink. He waited. Because the next 2 seconds were the most dangerous seconds of his life. When the cameras unfroze. And the sensors reactivated. If he wasn't perfectly still, perfectly aligned, perfectly hidden, everything would be over. The reset. At 1.4 seconds, the sensors hardened. At 6.0 seconds, the cameras unfroze. The ghost remained invisible. Because at that precise moment, he was already behind the cart, moving only when the cart moved, stopping only when the cart stopped. The guards had no reason to look behind them. No reason to suspect anything. No reason to imagine that an inmate, from a locked cell, was now walking behind them, like a silent shadow. This was the moment the impossible became real. Not a theory. Not a plan. Reality. The ghost was free of his cell. But the hallway was only phase 1. To outsmart the entire Supermax system, he had to blend into the one place no prisoner ever enters. The staff corridor. Into the staff area. For the first time in years, the ghost was breathing air that wasn't trapped behind a steel door. He wasn't free. Not even close. But he was loose inside the most secure building in America, and no one knew it. The cart rolled forward. The 2 officers kept talking. And the ghost moved with them, step for step, breath for breath, hidden perfectly behind stacked meal trays. He studied every angle, every shadow, every reflection. Because now he faced the most dangerous part of the entire plan. Crossing from inmate territory into staff territory. The staff wing had keypads, surveillance funnels, and ID scan locks. A place inmates never enter. A place where even a misplaced shadow raises alarms. But the ghost had calculated something almost no one else would ever notice. During meal delivery, staff doors unlocked for exactly 4 seconds. To allow the cart through. He didn't need a keycard. He didn't need a password. He needed timing. Approaching the first security door. The cart creaked toward the thick gray door marked "Staff access only." Every inmate in the world knew that door. The ghost had stared at it for years from inside his cell window. He knew its sounds. 3 beeps. A heavy clunk. A slow hydraulic slide. He whispered to himself, "Wait for the second beep." Bennett reached for his keycard, still distracted by whatever message he saw earlier. The younger guard yawned. They were relaxed, comfortable, predictable. Exactly as the ghost needed. Bennett tapped the keycard against the scanner. Beep. Light turned yellow. Beep. Light turned green. This was the moment. The hydraulic motor engaged. Clunk. The door latch released. And as the door began sliding open, the ghost stepped out of the shadow. Not forward. Not backward. Sideways. He slipped into the narrow, invisible slice of space between the moving door and the wall. A space so thin it barely existed. A space that no guard ever checked, because no human had ever tried to stand in it. The cart rolled forward, and the ghost vanished behind the door panel. He was now standing on the staff side of the threshold. As the door slid closed behind him, if he had mistimed it by half a second, if the sensor had detected an obstacle, the alarm would have sounded instantly. But it didn't. The door closed smoothly. The ghost was now inside the restricted staff corridor. And the guards? They kept walking, never knowing they had just transported an inmate deeper into the building, alone in the staff wing. For the first time, no officers stood around him. No inmates watched him. No cameras pointed directly at him. But that didn't mean the wing was safe. If anyone saw him, even for a split second, he would be tackled, restrained, and thrown into deep solitary for years. He exhaled slowly, softly, and began walking. Not fast, not slow. Exactly the pace of the camera's blind rhythm. Because here was the critical detail. The cameras in the staff wing were not continuous. They rotated in sweeps, a full arc every 8 seconds. He had mapped their pattern by studying the timing of reflections on the floor, the rhythm of shadows, and the buzzing sound the motors made. He moved only in the moments between sweeps. 8 seconds of movement, 8 seconds of stillness. A ghost drifting between beams of light. The locker room door. At the end of the corridor was the staff locker room, where officers stored uniforms, jackets, and, most importantly, extra ID badges. Not active badges. Not full access badges. But training badges used for new hires. Badges that could open soft lock doors. But not hard security areas. He didn't need the whole prison. He needed one door. One door that would take him into the administrative section, where paperwork, cleaning crews, and maintenance staff came and went. He needed to blend into the background. He reached the locker room door. Used the trick he studied from watching staff for months. Pushed the door. Exactly as someone exits, not enters. Most doors resist entry. They yield to exit. If he pushed at the wrong moment, the resistance would activate the alarm. He waited. Listened. Footsteps approached from inside. A guard leaving the room. The ghost braced himself. The door began opening, and he slipped past the officer, as if he were just another staff member walking through. He kept his head down, hands close. No eye contact. The guard didn't even look at him. The ghost was now inside the locker room. The uniform. Rows of blue shirts hung on hooks. Jackets. Hats. Badges. Belts. He didn't need a full uniform. Too obvious. He needed something subtle. Something that made him look like he belonged. Without drawing attention. He found it. A maintenance jacket. Simple. Grit. Unmarked. Standard issue. The kind janitors wear when fixing vents or cleaning vents. He slipped it on. It fit well enough. Next, he grabbed a cart used for cleaning supplies. Not heavy. Not noisy. Just normal. He placed a mop inside. A bucket. Random items that looked official. He had studied the maintenance team for years from behind that steel door. They were practically invisible. Guards rarely stopped them. Officers rarely asked questions. Nobody paid attention to the janitor. And that was the greatest disguise in the world. But he wasn't escaping just to roam the prison. He had a target. A destination. A purpose that no one, not guards, not inmates, not the system itself, could possibly predict. He wasn't trying to escape the Supermax. He was trying to escape something deeper inside it. But to reach that destination, he needed to leave the staff wing and enter the administrative corridor without being detected. And that path led straight through the camera bridge, the most heavily monitored section in the entire building. The camera bridge. The camera bridge was the place every staff member hated walking through. A long, narrow hallway suspended above two lower levels of the Supermax. Glass panels on both sides. Bright white lighting that left no shadows. And more cameras per square foot than anywhere else in the prison. Up above, hidden behind dark glass, the central security office watched every movement. Every blink, every step, every hesitation. No inmate had ever set foot here. No inmate was ever supposed to. But today, a solitary figure wearing a maintenance jacket and pushing a cleaning cart moved calmly toward it. The ghost kept his head tilted slightly down, exactly the way he had seen maintenance workers do hundreds of times. Confidence wasn't the trick. Humility was. If he looked too sure of himself, guards would notice. If he looked too nervous, the system would notice. He had to look like he did this every day of his life. The first challenge, the overhead cameras. The camera bridge had a specific surveillance pattern. 2 rotating overhead cameras, plus 1 still camera at the far end, plus floor-level motion detectors along the walls. The ghost had memorized the sweep intervals. Camera A, 5 seconds left, 5 seconds right. Camera B, 4 seconds left, 4 seconds right. Still camera, always facing forward. Floor sensors, triggered only by sudden speed changes. This meant he couldn't stop suddenly. Couldn't speed up. Couldn't turn too sharply. He had to move like a machine, in a place designed to expose human mistakes. So he timed it. Waited for camera A to sweep right. Moved during camera B's left sweep. Used the maintenance cart to block the still camera's line of vision. Just long enough for his body to pass through its field. Every action was timed to the fraction of a second. To an outsider, it looked like ordinary cleaning. To him, it was a tightrope walk above a canyon of alarms. Halfway across, he passed a huge convex mirror, mounted high on the wall. The mirror was designed to reflect his entire body, so guards could spot anything unusual. He couldn't hide behind the cart now. This was the moment that buried hundreds of escape attempts in the past. But he didn't panic. He had planned for it. The mirror trick. Guards don't analyze mirrors carefully. They glance. Just enough to notice movement. So the ghost used an old trick he'd learned from watching how staff behaved. He pushed the cart slightly to the left, so that its tall metal handle blocked the mirror's view of his chest. For exactly half a second. Just long enough for the main cameras to sweep away from his reflection. To anyone glancing at the mirror, it just looked like a janitor pushing a bulky cart. And in that half second, the cameras froze. He didn't trigger them. He didn't hack anything. He simply moved at the exact moment. When camera A and camera B both reached their cycle midpoints, the precise instant both cameras stopped for a micropause. Before reversing direction. The pause so small, most staff never noticed it. But the ghost had counted those pauses. For years. He whispered, "That's it," and kept walking. The control room window. As he neared the end of the bridge, he passed a tall window of tinted glass. Behind that glass sat the central security officers. 3 at minimum, 6 at maximum. They monitored monitors, watched feeds, tracked every movement inside the prison. And they were only 15 feet away from him. If one of them looked up at the wrong moment, even for half a second, everything would end. The ghost didn't look toward the window. Not once. He focused on keeping his pace steady, his posture relaxed, his cart rolling silently. But he noticed something useful in his peripheral vision. Only 2 officers were inside the room, and both were staring at the monitors. On the far left wall, something had caught their attention. Something happening in another block. He didn't know what. He didn't care. All that mattered was that nobody inside the control room was looking at the camera bridge. He pushed the cart forward. Steady. Smooth. 10 feet. 7 feet. 5 feet. Then finally, he reached the security door. To Administrative Wing A. The badge reader. This door wasn't like the staff locker room door. It required a card swipe. A proper one. His maintenance jacket had no badge. He had no keycard. No passcode. But he had something better. Observation. He knew that for years, guards had complained about this badge reader. He'd heard their conversations through the hallway vent. It glitches. Sometimes it reads slow. Just hit it, it'll work. So when he reached the reader, he didn't panic. He tapped the reader with the side of his fist, just like he'd seen officers do. Beep. Yellow light. He tapped again. Beep. Green light. The door unlocked. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a safety override. A simple programming choice to prevent staff from being locked out. During emergencies, the ghost whispered, "Humans build systems with shortcuts." And he walked through the door. When it closed behind him, he officially became the first inmate to ever enter the administrative wing. Without a keycard, without detection, and without triggering a single alarm. But this was still not his escape. He wasn't trying to get out of the Supermax. He was trying to reach something far more secure and far more dangerous. Something that no inmate even knew existed inside this prison. A hidden service corridor, used only by high-level maintenance teams and system engineers. And that corridor led to the most restricted part of the entire building. The place where his real goal waited. The ghost who broke a perfect system. In the end, the world never learned his real name. Not because the prison hid it. Not because the government erased it. But because the ghost never wanted fame. Never wanted chaos. Never wanted anyone to copy what he did. What he wanted was simple. To prove that no system, not even the strongest Supermax in America, is truly perfect. He didn't escape with violence. He didn't break locks. He didn't hack computers. He didn't overpower guards. He escaped with something far more dangerous. Patience. Observation. Timing. Discipline. He didn't rush. He didn't gamble. He didn't guess. For years, he studied the building like a language. Learned the rhythms of guards like footsteps in a song. Counted camera sweeps like moments on a clock. And little by little, quite invisible, he built a map inside his mind that was more accurate than the prison's own blueprints. This wasn't a story about brute strength. It was a story about how one silent man predicted every human habit, every mechanical pause, every security overlap, every second of weakness, inside a place designed to have none. When he finally stepped into that hidden service corridor, the place no inmate should ever reach, the Supermax never even realized it. The cameras never saw him. The sensors never felt him. The guards never suspected him. Because he didn't fight the system. He became the quiet space between its movements. The pause between its sweeps. The shadow behind its routines. A ghost, moving through a machine too confident in its own perfection. And that's the lesson this entire story leaves behind. Strength can be predicted. Force can be blocked. But persistence, discipline, and patience are invisible. The ghost didn't outmuscle the Supermax. He outthought it. Step by step. Second by second. Until the impossible wasn't impossible anymore. And by the time the alarms finally sounded, by the time the prison realized something was wrong, the ghost was already gone. Not loud. Not violent. Not dramatic. Just gone. A reminder to every prison, every system, every person watching. Sometimes the most dangerous man in the world is the one who never raises his voice, never makes a threat, and never stops watching. Because when discipline meets patience, the impossible becomes real.